All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to our FBP Med School panel event. My name is Maya, and I'm one of the co-chairs, presidents for the FBP Club today. Before we get into it, we just want to do a land acknowledgement. So we at Future Black Physicians would like to begin with a land acknowledgement. We wish to acknowledge this land on which the University of Toronto operates, and for thousands of years, it's been the traditional land of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and most recently, the Mississaugas of the Credit River. Today, this meeting place is still on the home to many Indigenous people from across the Turtle Islands, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to work on this land. All right, so let's start. We just want to introduce the team. Ruth, can you go ahead?
I'll start. Okay, hi, I'm Ruth. I'm the Director of Training for FBP. I've been a member for the past 3 years now, so yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep, and I think we have other team members here. Hi. All right, so let's just introduce the panelists, okay? So let's bring you guys in. Hi, everyone.
Hi. Okay, so I'll be moderating the event, so like asking you guys the questions. The way that it's going to work is it's kind of like a structured Q&A that's going to run through your undergraduate experience down to your medical experience today. And then we'll have like a time for questions at the end, like any sort of like reflections on your undergrad experience, your medical school, all the stuff in between, that kind of thing. And then if viewers want to ask a question, then they can comment below and we'll be able to ask those too. So first, if I could ask that you guys tell us your name, where you're studying right now, and your year of study. So yeah.
Who wants to start?
Yeah.
I can start. So my name is Amal. I'm a first-year medical student at U of T.
Hi, I'm McQueen. I'm a second-year medical student at U of T.
Hi, I'm Justice. I'm also a second-year medical student at UT.
Hello, I'm Ariel, also a second-year student at the U of T as well.
Nice. Okay, so we're going to jump into your undergraduate experience, if that's okay. And yeah, feel free, like whoever wants to answer first, go ahead and answer. Yeah. So what was your program of study as an undergraduate, and what school were you studying at? And then you can kind of talk about your overall undergraduate experience if you want.
Okay, I can start. So I did my undergrad at Queens. I was there for 4 years, and I did a Bachelor of Life Science. I majored in life science. I didn't do a specialization. I didn't do a minor. I didn't do a final project. I just, kept it simple. And yeah, I came in, so I graduated June 2019, and then I was fortunate enough to start in August 2019 at U of T. So I came right now.
Nice.
I'm on the other side of that, definitely in terms of I graduated undergrad several years back. People don't always know because they think I'm younger than I am, but I'm in my late 20s. So shout out to all my non-traditionals and career switchers and whatnot. But I graduated in 2014. I double majored in economics and international development. At the time, I had no particular inkling that I would end up going to medical school or that I even wanted to go down that path. I can kind of get more into my background like as we get further along, but I went to Yale University. That's my undergraduate institution. And yeah, so that's pretty much, I was very much like into, at the time, development economics. I thought I wanted to work in the UN. I didn't end up doing so. I did do a lot of work in the sector and in the nonprofit sector locally, and kind of found myself interested in medicine and got my, prereqs and everything together and applied. So I'm kind of an anomaly. There's not that many people that I've met who have like a non-science background entirely, or who didn't know that they wanted to go into medicine in undergrad. But yeah, we're out here. There's some of us for sure.
Did you end up going back to school to get the prerequisites, like back to university?
So I actually did like part-time courses and whatnot. a lot of schools, I kind of targeted more schools that weren't very strict. Like I know like U of Ottawa, for example, they're like, you need to have this exact like course series or whatever. U of T is pretty chill in the sense that you need to have like 2 science requirements. I think I had 1 from undergrad anyways, because I did it as like a distributional thing. And then like 2 social science and 2 social science / humanities, I think. You have to double check on that one, but yeah, so I ended up applying more so to schools that weren't very strict in the course sequence. But of course you have to like self-teach yourself, because you have to do well in the MCAT and like have MCAT level science knowledge. So
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Justice, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Justice, and I did my undergrad at U of T Scarborough as well. I think most of the audience here is from U of T Scarborough, so I'm just like you guys. I actually was, and I am actually an international student, so I came to Canada in 2012, did high school, grade 12, then applied to UTSC for my undergrad. So in terms of like the program, I did molecular biology and biotechnology for my undergrad. I also did a minor in psychology, like towards, I just added it towards like my 4th year, because I took a bunch of courses in that, and I felt like I could just get the minor. I might as well just get the minor. In terms of like so after undergrad, I did a master's actually in cell systems biology, and it's a 2-year master's program at U of T. Then after that, I applied to medical school. I always wanted to go into medical school, so my first, my undergrad experience is just like trying to, do well in school and get, experience, extracurriculars and so on, and write the MCAT, which we'll get to later. And I was fortunate enough to get into medicine.
Yeah, nice. Ariel, you can go ahead.
Yeah, I went to the University of Guelph for biology. Funny story about that. I initially didn't apply to biology, but didn't get into my first choice program. So I went to biology, and it was actually the best decision I could have made, because I think for me, a more general insight into science in general was more beneficial to me, as in I could excel more. I applied to medicine right after undergrad, and then I got in. I also got a minor in nutrition while in my undergrad degree. That was accidental though. Just took too many nutrition courses and found out that I had other requirements. So
yeah, awesome. I feel like that's usually how we get minors. The same thing happened to me in psychology. So what resources did you guys find most useful as an undergraduate student? And what would you recommend other students to really take advantage of to help them get into medical school in the future?
I can start.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think my colleagues here will have more insight into being pre-med in like that traditional sense and how to get into med school that way. But for me, one regret that I have from undergrad is not seeking out all of the resources that were available. Like they tell you, oh, these people are here to help you. These are the tutors. These are the whatever. Especially the institution I went to is like extremely wealthy and has like a lot of institutional endowment and whatnot. But I feel like I just felt like I had to do everything on my own. And I had that mentality of like, well, if I don't understand something or if I need help with something, I just need to kind of like figure it out. And I think part of it is like that first gen post-secondary kind of thing, which is the background that I'm coming from. So yeah, I would say just like be honest, like course correct. Like if you find yourself struggling with something, make use of the resources that are there. I feel like sometimes with medical students and like maybe pre-meds as well, is this idea of like wanting to always be right. Like I even noticed in like we have an anatomy tutorial, right? And we all like discuss and pick a solution or answer or whatever. And like literally every single time my group is too scared to present the answer to the TA and they make me do it. And I'm like, yo, we literally all discussed this. We all think that this is probably right. What is the TA going to do to me if I get it wrong? You know what I mean? So I think just like not being so afraid to make mistakes, because I feel like my approach to med school, and I think part of it's being a mature student, is like literally say whatever, get it wrong, And that's the thing that sticks in your head. So I would say that that's like really helpful for whatever field you're in. Make those mistakes, obviously hoping to do it earlier on rather than like on your final exam. And then just like kind of learn from that experience.
Yeah, totally. I agree. Yeah. Anyone else?
Yeah, I really want to echo what Aman said. I think, you know, a lot of people like going into medicine, it's usually they're type A and they want to be, right all the time. But, don't be afraid to fail. You just need to put yourself out there, and you're going to learn. And it's a journey. It's a learning process. And, the most important thing to do is to put yourself out there. In terms of resources, I found the most useful. Writing Center, the Writing Center is something that I didn't really take advantage of in undergrad. I think it's important to really learn how to express yourself and put, your thoughts into words and organize your thoughts. And, the Writing Center has some amazing people. I mean, some of the most, impactful people in my undergrad experience came from the Writing Center. Like I had a prof that really, sat me down and like told me this is how you should think. You should be, try to be open when you're writing, especially when I was applying to medical school. So try to be open, be vulnerable, that's what sells. That's what stands out. So, they're really good people and every institution has their own resources, but I think every institution should also have a writing center. So I think take advantage of those, and don't be afraid to ask about something that you're interested in doing. So if it's you're interested in volunteering and doing extracurriculars, just talk to people, talk to friends, talk to professors. Like, this is what I want, right? And very clear. If it's research, say this is what I want. I want to get a publication from this this research. And for me, I was really scared initially. I just wanted to, I didn't want anyone to see that I am, see certain sides of me, or I was very afraid of like saying what I want. And I think that it's important to get out of that, get yourself more comfortable and demanding what you want very early on, because no one's gonna know, right? So that's important. Just like putting yourself out there, asking for what you want, saying what you want to achieve from this program, and the doors will open for you, and you're gonna see resources and things coming your way.
Yeah. Does anyone else have any comments?
Yeah, I can add. I agree with everything that's been said, in terms of like putting yourself out there, taking risks. You're going to have to do that in medical school anyways, as was mentioned. Another thing I would say, in terms of, that like pre-med, like undergrad, like GPA hustle, because you're just, you're trying to survive and trying to get like the best grades you can. I did it more in like first year, like what you remember, like those prereq courses you kind of have to like bang out in like your first and second year. I wouldn't do it super often, but around exam time when I was reviewing stuff, like I went to go see my prof, and honestly, like I can say like I never left any of my professors like office hours like not feeling better. I always left feeling better, because realistically, not a lot of students are seeing them. Like I remember physics, I went in first year to go ask her some questions, and she was like playing on her phone because she was just like all alone, doing nothing. And like she not only she helped me understand some questions I wasn't understanding. She literally saved me some time. She was like, "Oh, don't study that," because this woman wrote my exam, right? So she like was able to pinpoint for me what to study, and get some things cleared up for me. So I would say, like, use your profs, and a lot of them actually, okay, I didn't go to U of T, so, and I know there's like a whole different like undergrad type of thing going on here, but honestly, if you can, like, use your profs, talk to them, go to their office hours. You don't have to do it frequently. I probably went like twice a year, but that helped me. I second Justice in terms of the writing center. I didn't use it for like my medical school applications, but in fourth year, I took like a year-long writing course in case I wanted to apply to the States one day. And they were super helpful. And I honestly hadn't taken like an essay-based course in like 4 years since high school. I used the writing center. I got their perspective on a couple of things, and I found that super helpful. But honestly, I think my greatest resource was like older students and like other students, because like if you have people that are willing to tell you how a course is probably going to go, like that's the easiest way to do it, like to get their perspective on like which exams are important, on like your study methods, like do I study past exams or do I study what she's told me in lecture or he's told me in lecture, right? Like the way you're going to know how to like finesse some of these courses, because honestly there's only, you have a limited number of hours in the day and like you have a life and whatever. um if you can get that perspective from students who've taken the course or students a year ahead of you, or even other students in the course who might have resources, like it just makes your life so much easier. And honestly, like your GPA is like better for it. And then we're also Black. So in terms of like mental health resources, like Black groups for me, like those were my savior. Those are my saving grace at Queens mental health wise. And just like community building, like that was like for my heart, like what that the best resource for me. So that's what I can offer.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. Did you want to add anything, Ariel?
Sure, yeah. I think there were two primary things which really helped me in my undergraduate degree. I think the first thing was, getting involved in student government. I think student government really allowed me to mature as a person, understand like how organizations work and that type of stuff. So in terms of like an extracurricular standpoint, clubs and student government are really helpful and they always look pretty good and you can always speak about them on like essays and stuff. And the second thing, which I found very important for me, was a group of people around me. So in my first 2 years of undergrad, I don't want to classify people, but I had a group of people that didn't, get the best marks. And it really kind of like, it kind of like shaped my view of what I should be doing in university. And it showed me basically that like, it was okay to get that level of achievement. However, when I kind of like shifted and went to a different type of friend group, I really discovered that, I could do better and I should do better because my friends were encouraging me, my friends were studying, and it was a really collaborative environment rather than a competitive one, which can happen in this type of situation. And fun fact, this is also how I met my girlfriend, Zikra, who's also in that school. She basically, I met her in second year, and she's probably half the reason why I got in and I got like a good GPA and everything, because before that I really was not that intense with the GPA thing. But after that, it like launched me up into like the stratosphere. Yeah.
You were trying to impress her.
Probably.
Shout out to Zikra. I'm sorry.
Shout out to the girlfriend.
Yeah. Shout out to her. Do you want to add to kind of the Black experience as an undergraduate student? I know it must have been different in like the States and Queens, and then you can speak about U of T too. Did you find that like particularly isolating, or how are you able to maintain like the school and life balance, knowing, especially being a Black student there and knowing how high your hopes are and you want to be a doctor, right?
Yeah, that's a good question. Definitely it was a predominantly white institution, but over the years, they started to do a lot in terms of like financial aid and like attracting different types of students. Like I probably would have never ended up there if not for like certain things happening in my life and like certain connections that I made. But yeah, there was a very strong Black student organizing and presence on campus. Like if you wanted it, you could be involved in it. And I'm still friends with a lot of the people that I've met and like still part of the Black alumni group. So that's always fun. But yeah, at the end of the day, I think being a Black student will come with its own advantages and its own challenges, right? I think, and there's no one monolithic Black experience either, right? Like I was able to relate to a lot of kids, students who were first gen university, kind of figuring out that whole thing, maybe people who like grew up low income like I did. So I think it's not always a bad thing in the sense that you can actually gain a lot of perspective and experience that can then help you to be a better physician, right? And so like sometimes in our clinical skills course or whatever, people will be like, oh, you're so good at eliciting social history. And I'm like, yeah, because these are the kinds of things that I think about. These are the kind of things that have shaped my life and the people in my community, my family, and those around me. So I think to think of the assets that we have coming from different backgrounds and wherever you may have been raised and like how you've matured as a person, honestly, it is an asset. It does come with its own challenges, but I think I don't want to always be stuck in this deficit model of like to be Black is just to struggle. I think, yes, we struggle, but we also resist and we grow and we do community support and we give back. Like most of the Black students I knew were doing like extra work to help with recruitment, to help with other students getting into whatever program they're in, to just be a resource for each other. So that's one thing that I'm so appreciative of as being a Black student and being a Black medical student. And actually, two people on this panel, I believe both Baklit and Justice were people who did a practice interview with me, like through the community of support. So like, you know, people give back, and I think Black student groups are like one of the most generous with their time that I've ever experienced, both in undergrad and like in medical school.
Yeah, absolutely. Does anyone else have anything they want to add?
I'll second that. Even within the BMSA, I think there's a really, it's like ingrained in our culture of like that like student organization in like giving back, because I think we're all like hyper aware of like our privilege and like the space that we take up, and it's almost like, you know, we know we know we represent our communities in like these spaces we have such privilege to access. So I think for a lot of us, the ties that we have with COS and like our growing ties in terms of even with other community organizations in Toronto, I think like was really well put. Like it's as much as we're in this new space, it's more of a reason and a motivation for so many of us to give back and donate our time. And like doing the practice interviews last year, like that was, you know, such a great experience for us. And I was also in the same seat a year before, and the people who are clerks in third years, me and Justice had the same mock interview day in February 2019, and we were, you know, we were interviewees and we had people who were a year above us. So it's like a cycle of giving back. It's honestly pretty beautiful. In terms of Queens, I will not sugarcoat it. I never do. And Justice and Ariel know, like it was terrible, especially the first year. Half the Black women I know like applied to transfer out. Some of them did. Everyone knows a Black woman who transferred out. It was a hostile place to be at like 18. Most people grew up in Toronto or GTA, so to be like 18 away from home for that extended period of time and to be in such a hostile space, terrible on anyone's mental health. I didn't even recognize myself by like December first year. And like kind of like what I mentioned before, the thing that saved me was QBAS, so the Queens Black Academic Society. AXA, the African and Caribbean Students Association, is it's a similar student group. And most people of either descent honestly name one of those organizations as the way they made it through. Thankfully that, you know, like what was mentioned, and that's happening at a lot of institutions, a lot of changes happen. You know, the campus in 2020 and the campus in 2014, 2015 looks very different. There's a lot more funding for Black student organizations. The Black student populations there have like grown exponentially. Every year it seemed like there were more, like I swear in first year in the wintertime, it was like weeks before I saw another Black person, you know? You just did not see them. But that wasn't the case by the time I was graduating. So you kind of, you know, in spaces that are a bit more hostile, like you have to create that kind of safe space for yourself. And that's what we pretty much did. And I mean, I left with sisters and like a pretty good sense of self. So like, I'm very grateful. Would I do it again? Honestly, probably, you know. I think most people at 22, 23, when they were leaving there, they had been through a lot. But they were pretty sure of kind of how they saw the world, and maybe not if what they wanted to do, like the person that they wanted to be. And it takes certain experiences for you to come out with something like that. And I got into med school like with no research. Like advocacy was what I did throughout all of undergrad. And I can attest to that growing within me in a space like Queens. So, and that's something that I'm going to do for the rest of my life, no matter what type of position I am. So, I mean, it kind of lends to the work that you do and the person that you become. But again, like the institution is still not great, but it's doing a lot better than it was like 5-10 years ago. So, I mean, you can't not cheer for progress.
Yeah, absolutely. And hopefully it's exponential in speed, when it comes up in the future. I kind of want to get into the MCAT. Is that okay? Yeah. Okay, cool. So overall, how did you guys find the MCAT? How did you prepare for it? Did you use any companies, that sort of thing? Take any courses? Yeah. So you can speak to your MCAT experience.
I could definitely
go ahead.
to that first. Anyways, for the MCAT, like honestly, the whole process of studying and actually writing it just felt like a mess to me. So like I felt mentally disorganized. I felt like I was doing it wrong for the entire time. That's what I mean. But the end result was a result that was able to get me into medical school. So like, I just want to emphasize that it really does feel like you're not doing like the right thing the entire time. But that doesn't mean that there's not a right thing to do. I think for the MCAT, the thing that helped me most was from a science background, was not doing as much content review. So not spending 90% of my time doing content, because that knowledge was already somewhat there, not really, but somewhat. And I think the most important thing is actually mastering the techniques of writing the MCAT. So there's a whole bunch of time management techniques, reading the question techniques. They take a really long time to learn, and you can have all the knowledge in the world, and you still won't get the question right if you don't know how to like kind of reason out what they want you to answer. So I think the thing that helped me most was focusing on practicing the test, writing practice tests and stuff like that, using AAMC sponsored materials, and practicing cars like a year in advance. Well, I didn't practice a year in advance, but I wish I had, and it would have been very useful. So that's really my advice.
Yeah. Justice, do you want to speak?
So I completely agree with what Ariel said. That's what I actually tell people that I mentor when they're writing the MCAT. It's like practice, practice, practice. So for me, I actually wrote the MCAT twice. The first time I wrote the MCAT, I was doing my co-op placement, and what I did was that so it's like it's a 9-to-5 job, but sometimes it goes over. So after work, I would go to I think Robert's library. So that's where I would study for the MCAT. Right now, I can never step into that library anymore because I have associated the library with like trauma and whatever. But anyway, so I go to Robert's library after work. Then on the weekends, I'll study for it. And I think the main thing I was doing was practicing. Because I realized that when I took the practice test, I did well on like the physical sciences and like the psychology and the biology section, because I already had the background. So it was the car section that I needed to work on. So like I decided to do a lot more practice on that. The first time I really my score was good, but the car section wasn't as great. So I wanted to get a better score on that. So I wrote it again right after undergrad. So the summer after I graduated. And I just literally just spent the whole summer, just like, not the whole summer. I think the first 2 months, just like practicing cars. And then I wrote it. I didn't really spend a lot of time on the other sections because I knew I was already good on the other sections. And I got a much better score. So 2 lessons from that. Don't be afraid to, I know a couple of people that had to write it multiple times. So if you don't do well, don't give up. I think it's the most important thing. Don't give up. So write it again.
11 o'clock.
It's expensive, and you have to keep that in mind. So be aware of there are a lot of programs out there to help you. There's the MCAT assistance program. The Community of Support has the program to so rather than paying for like the prep courses, which are really expensive, you can get medical students helping teach the MCAT. So if you're financially disadvantaged, take advantage of those resources. And the second thing I was going to say is like just seconding what Ariel said, is practice as much as you can. It's a skill, right? In the end, it's a skill like any other thing. Like we're learning now in medical school how to listen to the heart, or like do a cardiac exam, or do a respiratory exam. It's the same thing as learning to do well in the car section. It comes with practice, and even right now we have to practice over and over again to master those skills. So you're building that I would say that technique of like practicing and acquiring a skill is the same thing that you're going to do when you get into medical school. So starting now is good.
Yeah, it's also like an 8-hour test, right?
Yeah, it takes stamina. I would add that in terms of the MCAT, a standardized test tests how well you can take a standardized test, right? I'm sure there's people who know all the knowledge, and because they are not primed to answer the questions in a certain way, they may need to take it multiple times, or they may not do well. I would say for me that I'm probably the opposite to a lot of people, in the sense that I come from a social science background. I'm also a writer. So like cars for me was almost innate, to be honest. Like once I kind of just like picked up on a few things, I didn't really practice that section. In terms of the other things, funnily enough, like I had a really good science background from high school, and you would be surprised that MCAT is not so much more advanced than that, because like the first year science courses are kind of, also I did IB, so it's kind of, I guess, more advanced, but like a lot of the science courses are essentially like high school plus. But the thing that I did struggle with was the one thing that I did not take throughout high school. Like I think I didn't take it in grade 12, was physics. And I was like literally, okay, in terms of the courses that I took to kind of prep myself for medicine, I took like the intro sciences, like the bios and the chems and the biochem and whatnot, organic. I kind of dabbled and tried to like self-teach myself certain things. But when it came to physics, I was like, I just didn't feel like I had a strong foundation in it, because I didn't do it throughout high school. So I kind of focused more energy there. Then funnily enough, my actual exam day, I show up and I'm like, alhamdulillah, because what I saw there was like mostly chem, and I'm pretty good at chem. So I just like managed that. But I would say in terms of actual resources that I used, I studied, I went through ups and downs. Like my family and friends know, I was just like, what the hell am I doing? It was almost the time as a non-traditional, especially someone who was working in a different field for however many years, I was about to give up because it's exhausting. I was studying while working full time and like had family commitments and was volunteering. So I took longer to study for it than some people do, because I couldn't study full time. I also used Khan Academy, Lifesaver, like bless that man. And I used Kaplan. I wrote it down, Kaplan and Princeton review books. So actually, I kind of picked and chose based off of what a community of support person suggested. And I was like, I don't have time for a course. I had heard from some people that courses are good for giving you time management, but not necessarily more than that. And maybe people can speak to it, because I haven't actually taken one. But I found that if I use the books, use Khan Academy, I was kind of able to figure it out for the most part, and then do well on the MCAT. So I only took it one time. But yeah, it's definitely a stamina thing. And it's funny that Justice brought up Robarts, because I wanted to do like the full practice test like once a week when I could. And if you go to Toronto Public Library, there's no way you're going to stay on a computer for that long. And I wanted to go somewhere like outside of my home. So my little sister was at U of T undergrad at the time. So I used to take her ID and pull up to Robarts on Saturdays. And like I would go from like 9 to whatever, however long it took. So you really do have to simulate the exam, because if you're just chilling and doing at your own pace, it's not going to truly show you how much you're able to master in terms of that time, because there really is a time crunch. It's not really so much that it's so complicated. It's like, how do I get through these questions, know kind of the types of questions they ask, and then bam, 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 bam. So it's like really about trying to put yourself in the game and like that mind frame. It's not really anything I think that's like insurmountable for your members. It's just like put in the time and then test yourself frequently.
Yeah.
So going off that, did you guys dedicate your like have a set schedule for a couple months? Like how did you guys like manage that?
Yeah.
I can actually kind of speak to the course because I did take one. Also, yeah, I guess everyone did it in Robarts because listen, I'm from Toronto, right? So I'd come back in the summer.
Mhm.
I don't study there either, Justice. That was like a 4 months that I'm done. Done with that place. But yeah, so I was fortunate enough to be in a place where I could take a course. Like I took the Princeton course. I took it after second year because that's when, in terms of like the undergrad pre-med thing, that's when everyone's like, okay, you just knocked out a bunch of these prereqs that are the most relevant, like Ariel was saying. I took it after my second year. I took the Princeton review course. It might have been, I don't know why, because I had just come off of a really difficult semester, like academically, but was mentioned, like the time management part of the course really did appeal to me in terms of, I was also working that summer, but the course was like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and I knew that I could commit like the 3 days per week that summer. So the thing about the course, there were definitely benefits, but like what I would say about it is that like where I had great teachers, I did well. Where I had shit teachers, like I did poorly. And like it reflected in how much I understood and how much I studied. So like I also did do life sciences, but I also had like this incredible, like the bio part for like the third section. He was fantastic. He explained everything. It was like 1 + 1 = 2 when he explained it, right? Amazing. Cars lady, amazing. And chem, again, amazing. But physics, for example, the way my course worked, they jumbled it up so that physics was supposed to be spread out because physics is still like, even if you've taken it, like a bit difficult, right? But something had happened, so they crammed it all in like 2 weeks or 3 weeks or so. And even for someone like with a decent enough physics background, like it was really difficult for me to cram it. So like my studying like was reflective of their scheduling and like the professor they chose. So for me, even though, I got the basic grasp like of it, I still struggled with physics when honestly I really shouldn't have. And I feel like that was like a reflection of like the scheduling and the organization of that course. So realistically, like if I had to, so I ended up doing fine. I didn't do like amazing, and I like was gonna rewrite, but then I ended up like it ended up working out. I ended up getting in, so I was like, okay. I definitely on the second time definitely would not have taken the course. If I go back, I just know myself. I think a really big part, honestly, is knowing yourself. I know that if you leave me there for days with books, like I honestly won't do it. You know what I mean? So I just had to do what was best for me, and that was like telling me, McLeod, on this day you're going to be in the class, and this man is going to say your name, and he's going to expect that you've done your work. You have to scare me to do work in the summer, And I know that about myself. So I think you just honestly have to be real about like your workload, your time management skills, and like what you can do. And I think as long as you're honest with yourself, like you will get to where you need to be. Because like everyone said, it's definitely doable. It's high school plus is the best way to describe it. Like you just that's it's not too much higher than that. It's not at that level, but you really do have to be honest with yourself and like what you struggle with and what you do well with. And if time management is not one, you also don't have to pay for a course. Again, like COS, this was the summer before COS started that program. But now COS has that program every summer and it's virtual, right? So they can reach so many people and they have all of these fantastic tutors. So if time management, you're someone like me and that's something you struggle with, like look into some kind of thing to kind of set you right. But yeah, just be honest with yourself. That would be like my tip.
Yeah, this is like amazing advice for people who want to write the MCAT. I mean, I don't want to, but for people who do, this is like really good advice. I think I'm going to go on to your volunteer experiences, extracurriculars, kind of what you guys did during your undergrad to make yourselves stand out from other students, because realistically, everyone's going in with like a 3.8, 3.9 GPA, right? On a 4-point scale. So how did you guys make yourselves stand out as undergraduate students applying to med school, or master students applying to med school?
I can start.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I would almost rephrase that because I didn't do anything I thought to make me stick out on an application. I'll be honest with you, like I did what I loved. Like there was an activity or something that I did in second year. I probably put hundreds of hours into it and so much time and like a year of work, and it was one line on my CVS. That's what I did it for me. You know, I honestly, like during that experience, I fed into things that gave me that same love back. And I honestly think like that's how you will find, and like that comes across in your application, you know, like there are hours recorded, but even the way like you describe your essays and like you make connections in terms of references, if you do what you love, like it will come across. And like I have no regrets in terms of that. Like, yes, me having no research, even Justice knows, I was like, ooh, like that's the whole man. But you know, did I want to do research? No, like it's kind of boring. I'll be honest. No, sorry, Justice. But for me, like I did a lot of like organizing in Kingston. I worked a lot like with the very small Black community there, with the Black faculty there. I started a mentorship program for first year Black students, period, because I knew how tough that transition process was. And I grew like with the Black community at Queens, and like that was my love, that was my passion. And that was pretty much like everything that was on my CVS or is that what it's called? The CVS. Sorry, I keep calling it
ABS.
Yeah, ABS. That was.
Oh yeah.
And on the extended ABS and like the essays, like that's pretty much what I talked about. Like again, I pretty much, yeah, I think I just did extracurriculars that I loved. And I would say stick with them. Like don't, you know, jump from here, there, do 1 hour, whatever. Everything that I talked about, like I was doing pretty much week in, week out, hours and hours. So I would say whatever you're doing show commitment, stick with what you're doing, but hopefully you're doing it because like you care about it and like you're passionate about it. And like I can go on into like what I did at Queens, and like, you know, awards and stuff always help. And like that also like helped me. But for the most part, yeah, I think community work was what I loved and what I did. And I'd just say do your passions, like whether that's opera or community work or research.
I think there's definitely a way to frame everything. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Right? I think that's a really good like testament to that it doesn't have to be all academic based. And that's not what they're looking for in doctors completely anyway, right? Yeah, go ahead.
Look at this panel because everybody's coming at it from different angles. Honestly, I would say strive to be as passionate as Macleet. Like find those things that really make you want to show up and excel, right? Because there's no one thing, there's no one essay, there's no one activity that they want. It's really, are you able to show that you were, you know, generally involved in, you know, a few activities that you cared about, that you can reflect on? The main thing is really that you have some kind of self-awareness to understand how it fits in and how it relates to medical school. I think in terms of standing out, I don't know if I'll frame it that way, but like, I mean, I don't think many people with my specific background were applying to medical school, right? Like it's not that common. So I think you stand out naturally. But in terms of things that I did, I knew, again, it was kind of organic in the sense of when I was like, okay, I'm considering going into medicine, like, let me kind of like get a feel for, I don't know, like, I don't want to work like volunteer in a hospital. I felt like it would just be a bunch of pre-meds, like who are super young, no offense to anyone. But I was just like in a different stage of life. And so one thing that I was already really involved in the HIV and AIDS sector, like the most recent work that I was doing was with HIV and AIDS funding in East and Southern Africa. So kind of like a global health bent. That's kind of how I ended up finding my way into medicine, was like through an interest in HIV and AIDS. But was really coming at it more from like the community-based support and activism side. I don't have like any scientific research that I've done, maybe in medical school, who knows? But I feel like there's people who already have like their masters in like basic sciences and whatnot. So maybe not. But in terms of that, like I ended up volunteering a lot with hospice, and I really enjoyed that too because I had experienced like a loss in my own life, and the training is so helpful. Like I recommend it to anyone who's trying to look for an activity where your training will truly help you, I think, in terms of really understanding yourself, how you deal with grief and loss, and then being able to respond to the needs of people at this very sensitive time of life. There's so many different scenarios that came up in my medical school interviews where I felt like there was a direct connection to things that I had been trained on, even things about like trauma-informed care and like all these things that I found really interesting. And through that, I ended up volunteering quite a lot with a specific hospice called Journey Home that services the homeless population in, it's located at like Jarvis and Shooter, so downtown East area. And that was an amazing experience. I literally just wrote, we do this thing called portfolio where you like kind of reflect on different things. And I just wrote a piece that was kind of about my time there and like some of the people that I got to know. So that was kind of volunteering that I was doing while like out of school, like more recent. And in undergrad, it was interesting because the ABS tells you like list everything from 10 years ago. And I was like let me try to find verifiers from people that I may have not really seen for like how many years, right? I wish I had like kept those things on deck because I knew that I wanted to pursue some further education. I just didn't know what. And I think medical school applications are like extremely comprehensive compared to some other graduate programs. So yeah, I was very, very involved in service. So I used to like work with social justice groups, refugee resettlement, which is something I'm still really interested in, like refugee health. And yeah, I was kind of like doing a lot of that type of thing. And then socially was involved in like Black and African groups on campus. So yeah, it was a little mix of everything. But I think I also talked a lot about my work experience, and that took up a big part of my application as opposed to like extracurricular activities and whatnot. As more of like a mature student.
Yeah, I think this is like really comforting for other students to hear because it's like, it doesn't have to be research. Super hard to get research at U of T anyway. Like profs are looking for like 1 or 2 people. But I know Justice, you did research, so you can
I know. I think,
yourself down.
I think what McLeod said about knowing yourself is like the most important thing, because I knew that I'm a nerd. Like I know that. Like I've always been like such a geek. So like I used to like growing up like to talk about like, you know, what is DNA and like all this like really nerdy things. So I knew I wanted to go into research even when I came. So when I arrived in Canada, I was like one of the most, you know, exciting things. I was like, oh, I can actually start to, you know, work for a professor and do research and try to understand the world and whatever. But so like you really knowing what you're about, and that's going to sell, right? But I think like Aman said, like there's certain experiences that I recommend that you should get, because, you know, even though I did a lot of research, so I did a master's, you know, in basic science, you know, what actually stood out and what I talked about a lot more in my application and in my interviews were things that I did outside of academia. So I did hospice as well, and I talked about that, and it was really like life-changing, like some of the experiences I had, and, you know, talking to people at, you know, and being there with people at the most vulnerable times, and I had stories about, I experienced things that I think that shaped me in ways that make me a better doctor. And I can't really talk about like, oh, the night I spent in the lab titrating, you know, this molecule. Like that no one's gonna care, right? So you know, I think that do what you like, but also try to grow. I think that's the most important thing. Try to find things that are gonna make you better and grow you and allow you to grow as a person. So if you're interested in medicine, there's certain core competencies, like there's a CAN-MED role. So you need to be, you know, a scholar. That's one thing. Yes. So research is one way to do that, but it's you can do it. You can show scholarly activity in other ways, but, you know, you also need to be to show that you're a professional. You need to show that you know, you're a good communicator, and this comes from things that you do outside of school, right? So you learn a lot outside of school. And also for me, I think there's a bunch of work I did at my church, because I felt that, you know, when I arrived in Canada, my dad took me to this church in Scarborough, and I think that was like, for me, like as a new immigrant, I don't know anyone, I don't know, like, you know, I don't have any connection to anyone, and like that was like my my rock in a way, so that I could from there go out and do other things, right? So I built this family away from home at that church, and the people there are still supporting me till today. So and I volunteered there and I helped a lot. I started a mentorship program there. It's still going on right now. Like I'm helping a lot of new immigrants to adapt to the city and build like academic and emotional and spiritual foundation. So I think that just do things that allow you to grow, understand who you are, and try to just get better and better, right? And build mentors. Like I think mentorship is one of something that's underrated, but look for someone that has gone through the process and let them help you grow.
Yeah. Ariel, in terms of your application, how important do you think it was to kind of put your personality in there a little bit? Do you know what I mean?
I think it's extremely important. One of the most important things that you can do, because you can have the perfect application with all of the CanMeds represented, but if you treat it like a job resume, it's not going to come off as you. It's not going to come off as what you are, what you represent. So you need to write your applications in a way that really demonstrate the themes that you want to bring to the profession. So that means like if you're primarily interested, like Nicolita is in advocacy and community organization, you got to really harp on that and make that the theme of your essays. Talk about what it means to you as a person more than what it means to you as like a doctor, because it's more general than just being a doctor. It's about being a humanitarian. It's about being an advocate. It's about being a scholar, all the things that they say in the CanMed roles. So you really got to find a way to integrate who you are with the CanMed roles and what the university wants. So it's kind of like a really interesting game of like finding out how you match up with that institution and being completely honest while still trying to sell yourself, of course. And it's really hard to do. And that's why like I think everyone should start reflection now on why they want to join this profession and what's going to be their defining feature in the profession once they're eventually there. And that'll really guide your applications and your work.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Because at the end of the day, it's like your degree is going to serve you, right? You have to be a good fit at that school for that program. And it also has to be a good fit for you. So yeah. In terms of like your application materials, and anyone can answer this, how are you able to kind of obtain your references? Because I know that's something that's super scary for people to ask for references from profs. Like, who did you reach out to? Yeah. And what advice do you have to give?
I can speak to that.
Yeah, go ahead.
So that was really difficult for me because I'm kind of like, I don't know what to describe myself, but not a person that talks to people easily. Anyways, so for half of my references, I knew them. We were on talking basis, so it was really easy. But for the other half, it's like the type of person, like 3 years ago, I had done a significant event with them, and I wanted to really talk about that event. And I'd need to basically cold email the person and like say, hey, do you remember me? This random person that was a volunteer among like 50 people. And it's really uncomfortable, but it's also completely necessary for what you want to do. And you have to do it. Like there's no other way. You have to get around it, and you need to call these people, you need to talk to these people, preferably like over the phone rather than email works, but over the phone and stuff, just so you can gauge their reaction and gauge what they're thinking. If they have a positive reaction to you, then they're gonna write a good reference. If UFT calls them, they're gonna say good things. So make sure that they're on your side, first of all. And
sorry, go ahead.
Another thing that I mentioned, I know that the application system has changed now, but for your most important references, so the ones that are going to fill out the form online, make sure that they're people that truly know you, not people that you did impressive things with. Don't choose those people, and don't know you. Choose the people that truly know you as a person, that can truly speak to your value, and that can give you basically 100% on everything, because you want those people to be your advocates.
Yeah. How many references do you need for the U of T application in particular?
It should be 3, and I don't think anything has changed. Just now they need to fill out a standardized form. In the past, it was a reference letter, which was a lot harder to get. Now a form is a lot easier to get people to fill in, but it's also more impersonal, so I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think when it comes to references, definitely ask the person straight up, do you feel that you could speak to these things, right? Because a lot of people will be honest and say, not really, or they'll tell you that they can. I think if that person is not 100% enthusiastic, do not choose them, right? Because they may kind of put something in there that's like, oh, they were generally pleasant or they were decent. And that's not something that will make your application better, right? It will just be kind of there. And in fact, it might actually detract. So really try to find people who would write something enthusiastically. You don't necessarily have to be super close with them. Sometimes I find that it's like a person to person thing. Like some people care a lot more about giving back in this way and some professors don't. For me, like being out of school and having not really, I wish I had, again, like put everything in motion then just to like have things on deck, and I did not do that. So I was reaching out to a professor. He was actually in the business school, but like it was a course that I took for the development side of my major. It was on social enterprise, and we did like a senior research project and like case study. So I reached out to him and I was like, I don't know if you remember me, but like I'm applying to medical school. And he was just like, yeah, of course I remember you. And he's like very excited. He's like, that's so random. Like, I did not see you doing that. And so we just had this conversation. And I could tell that he would be a good reference. I didn't have like any like science prof or whatever that was like super relevant that I could have picked from. So I went with him just to like say that, hey, like in her economics and development thing, she was great. I don't know about medicine, but here's hoping. So that was him. And then I did my a director at the organization that I was working at. So kind of like who could speak to me as an employee. And I knew that she really, like, from performance reviews and stuff, right? Like in a work capacity, it's kind of easier to know where you stand with someone, and knowing that she really valued me as a team member and would say positive things. And then I think my third one was from one of my volunteer commitments. So it kind of rounded out. But again, the scholar one, I was like a little bit less, or like trying to choose someone that was a professor, I was a little bit hesitant. But I was like, okay, if you know that I'm a non-trad, like this comes with the territory. Like the professors I gained the most connection with were in economics and development, because that's what I studied, right? So I think just be mindful and definitely ask people if they have the bandwidth and if they can write something enthusiastic, like just straight up, because they may just tell you, like, honestly, like I really want you to do well, but I don't know if I can speak to this, or I don't have the time. And at least you then know, right?
Yeah, totally. For Macleod and Justice, do you guys want to speak to the interview process at U of T?
Sure. I will quickly just.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
I will quickly just say about the reference letters. I did not have a professor write any of my reference letters. I had, and this is not my recommendation, but I had my high school English teacher. She saw me in grade 9 and grade 12, so she had known me at that point for like 4 or 8 years. That summer, I happened to work for the Art and Archives department of TD Bank. So he was just like the art director. And I had someone who had attended some of the work that I had done in terms of like the Black community in Kingston. I thought about doing like a Black science prof, but like I knew where I was. Again, like you have to, exactly what Amal was saying in terms of being real with yourself and real with how enthusiastic you think these people will be for you. They have to be in your corner, right? And I was like, there's like one really nice prof I had who I knew at the end of third year probably could write an extremely mediocre, very blanketed reference letter, but I chose to go with people who I thought knew who I was to my core. That happened to be my high school English teacher. Had I been in close contact with her for the past 4 years, like on and off, yes, but I knew that she could like write to who I was as a person. So I chose to go with, even out of undergrad, like not even the non-trad route, like with no props and no science like props like backing me up. Again, like I'm not saying that's the way to go, but like it is possible. But just in terms of what everyone's saying, in terms of going with people who you know will really be enthusiastic about you as a person and can vouch for your like you being a doctor and that being like a fantastic thing for society, I would say.
Yeah.
Oh, but yeah, the interview process, Justice, you can do that.
Yeah. Thanks, Macleod. No, I'm kidding. No, I think you can also gauge, like, you know, are you vibing with this person? Do you think like this person really cares about you and about your success? So like even when I was applying to graduate school, right there, I had a bunch of professors like trying to like, recruit me, and it was like the one that I felt that understood my story and was really willing to help me get to. He actually asked me like, "What do you want? Where do you see yourself? How can I help you get there?" I was like, "Okay, this is someone I want to work with." Right, rather than people who are just like thinking about themselves and like how they can publish as many papers as they can, right? So, you can get a sense from people and just have a sense of and even like I was remembering. Sorry, I'm just going to talk about a little bit about reference letter. I remember, just during grad school, because like in grad school you get very close with professors and you get to see how they think, right? So I remember like this. I don't know if I would say eavesdropping or like just like I think it was like a general conversation with a couple of professors, and they were just talking about like how students approach them to write reference letters, and some students like they might have been in the class but they don't really know the student, and the student still comes up to them and say, "Can you write a reference letter?" And the professor actually says, "I don't think they would say yes because it's mean, but they actually said it right there. I'm just gonna write like one or two sentences and like so." I'm like, if this is what's happening, then you really need to be careful who you ask for your reference letter, because I think that the most important thing is to try to build a relationship with the person, and then and ask the person, do you think you can write me a strong reference letter, right? And you can also share some things that you would like them to write about, so they can they can use that when they're writing the letters. I think now it's like for U of T, it's like the checklist and everything, but I think that concept still applies. The interview process. Where do I begin? So, so I think for me, like if for me, like what I think is that if you're comfortable presenting, you've given a presentation and you've learned how to present to people comfortably without getting too anxious, and not actually everyone gets anxious. I think knowing how to manage your anxiety, I think you're good for an interview, because it's a similar thing, because it's the main thing that that affects people, I think, is just the anxiety and the nerves. Because if you've gotten through the process of applying and writing a good application and you've been selected for an interview, the only thing that's, I think, the main thing that's like the barrier now is just calming down and being able to speak to what you wrote in your essays and in your autobiographical sketch. So what I did for me was, so I applied for the Summer Application Support Initiative. So I think he's in 4th year now, so 4th year medical student. So back then he was in 2nd year. He helped me write the application, but he was like really nice and said, if you do get an interview, I'm very happy to help you prepare for that interview. And that was like, like godsend for me, because like he actually like we scheduled a bunch of interview prep. He sat me down, we did like practice interviews together. He told me like what I can do better, what I was doing well, and I still remember, because luckily I had a couple of interviews, so I still remember. Despite that, my first interview, I was still like a nerve-wrack, and I knew what to say, but I was just so nervous. But after doing that, the second interview, I felt like I got a lot more comfortable, because I was like, I went through this and nothing bad really happened. So what am I worried about? So by the time I got to UFC, I was like so relaxed, and I was like much better. But some people, they have only one interview, so in that case, try to get a simulation of the real interview as much as you can, right? I remember my girlfriend back then, she's my fiance now, but she actually, we scheduled a bunch of interview preps, and she would actually like get into a role like really serious. I'm not even kidding, like pretend that she's the interview. And I remember it was my first ever practice. I was so nervous, like I almost cried in front of her. And but that was what helped me. By the time I got to the real interview, I was much more comfortable. So if you don't do well the first time in your prep, that's good, right? Don't feel like once you do a practice interview, you're going to do it very well. The point of this is to learn and get more comfortable speaking about your experiences and speaking about selling yourself and showing the passion, right? Because to get to this stage, you really have put a lot of work, right? So showing that passion that you have, and it's going to come out very well. So just come with practice.
Did you apply through the Black stream? I know that's available now at U of T. Did all of you apply through that stream?
Yeah, that's I think anyone can speak to that, but and that's another thing that helps because now through the BSAP, you have people from the Black community being part of the interview process. So I remember the first person that interviewed me at U of T, she was a Black lady, and you could tell she was like rooting for me, right? So I was so much more comfortable. I just like you could tell, like when you saying the point, like you see her reaction, like the person's reaction to, oh, I got that. I did. Oh, I'm gonna eat this. This is gonna be good. So by the time I got out, I was like really comfortable. By the time I got to the next person was like, someone from outside the Black community. But I was so much more comfortable that I was just like, I know what to say here, right? So and that really helps.
Yeah,
I didn't. Go ahead, McLean.
Okay, I was quickly gonna say, I think there's something to be said about like the interview process through the BSAP stream, because even me, on interview day, I literally like, you walk into a hallway and they have all the doors set up and little rooms and whatever. And I said to myself before I went in, I was like McLean, I was like, if it's a white man, talk to him with a confidence as if it's a Black woman sitting in front of you. And lo and behold, it was a nice woman of color and then 3 other Black women throughout the entire panel. So it's like literally, like I literally said something to myself about like my own like unconscious like discomfort that comes with interviewing someone who I feel like, you have to understand, most of my experiences were related to advocacy in the Black community, who I felt like maybe would not be able to understand. And to have that like lifted, woo, what a weight. So I think Amal can talk about her interview experience, but I think there's something to be said about like the thought and the intention behind removing that type of barrier for Black students in the interview process. Like Justice said, it feels so nice. It feels like, you have someone rooting for you. It feels like I felt like I was talking to an auntie at points, So I loved it. I loved the interview process.
Yeah, for me, I had 2 Black interviewers and 2 non-Black interviewers. One of them was a woman of color. I think she was South Asian. But I think everybody who is involved is generally like for supporting Black students and trying to improve recruitment of Black students into medicine. I didn't realize too like how psychologically beneficial it would be, because you're so used to this idea of having to translate yourself in certain ways, or not seeing yourself represented in positions of power and decision making, that psychologically, like to be in a room, like I remember I had I think he was a Nigerian physician, and he was so like hyped. Like it wasn't, I was like, are they even allowed to do this? Like literally everything I said, he was just like excited, and like he was like, trying to push me further. And I just appreciated that so much, because I didn't realize how psychologically programmed you can be to think that quite honestly, we haven't been in those spaces, right? Like we had a medical class at U of T with Chika Stacy, one Black student, a couple of years back, right? So it is changing, but it's amazing to have an interview process where you do feel you see yourself reflected to some degree, and then you can kind of like let your guard down a little bit more and be more free, as opposed to thinking, oh, like, will they understand? Like for me, I was just like, how real do I keep it, right? Like I'm a very social justice oriented person. So I was like, okay, how do I like be me? But then I'm also thinking, are these people going to think that I'm a quote unquote reverse racist, or like, whatever. So like having that kind of a thing in your head will then kind of prevent you from expressing yourself the way that you want to. And that's not to say like go in there 100% super radical, because I really am. But like obviously tone it down towards like a medical school application, but you can really show who you are and like be open and honest. And I had a really amazing experience in my interview. I was nervous, but then like once I actually got in there, I was like, okay, these people want to see me here. I just need to show them like what I can do in this interview.
Yeah. Ariel, do you have anything you want to add through your experience?
Sure, yeah. I think it's funny, me and Justice, I believe, were in the same interview circuit, so we both have the same experiences there. But a apart from that, I would just reiterate what everyone said. You can be yourself, a toned down version sometimes, but you can be yourself. Management of anxiety is extremely important, and don't be scripted. Don't practice too much, unless you're the type of person that excels at practicing too much. But I find that there's an intermediate level of practice that's really the sweet spot, and you should know your application well and apply to your BSAP if you're Black, of course, because it ain't gonna get any better than that. And yeah, everyone really wants you to succeed. It's not like they're gonna tear you down after every single question. And I guess if you do get an interview, after the interview, just don't think about the interview. It's gonna be impossible. It's impossible advice, but don't think about it in terms of, oh, I did well or oh, I did not. You can't know. There's so much mental distortion, there's so much anxiety, there's so much rethinking that it becomes something completely different after a couple of weeks. Me, like, I felt okay going out. I felt okay a month later, but like 2 months later, I started feeling really bad about it. And my girlfriend Zikra, who went through the same interview process, she was nervous from the very beginning. And like I talked to her about it, and it sounded like she was just hitting all the points, and she did a great interview, but she somehow thought she'd failed. And it's an interview; you can't even fail an interview. But please keep things in context when you're in the interview, and please don't think about it too much, and don't give yourself an anxiety.
Very good advice. Yeah, Maya, do you want to take it away?
So, you guys want to briefly just touch on your autobiographical sketch and how you made yourself stand out and how you made your application competitive.
And also how that is different from like a statement of intent or like a personal statement. Do you know what I mean? That is like required from like a grad school, for example.
Yeah.
I think this kind of came out a little bit in some of the earlier conversation we had, but what I can add is, honestly, having a writing background, like I write creatively, was very helpful because one of the main things is to tell a story. And I don't mean to like fabricate a story. I mean to put into context your various experiences and be able to depict them in a way that is interesting and catches someone's attention and also shows them why you would be a good fit for medicine. So that's a lot of different things to tackle. I think people don't spend enough time working. I guess you're talking about the sketch, but I'm just going to talk about the essay because I think I've touched on the sketch before. A lot of people, and I've learned this too, because a lot of people come to me for editing, which I'm happy to do. I've done that like for years, even before this whole medical school thing. But a lot of people think they can throw something together like real quick and it's going to come out the way they want. And I think this genre of writing is not easy. It's like, how do you strike a balance between being confident and not being arrogant? How do you strike a balance between like showing them med is for me while also being like, hey, I'm like a well-rounded individual, right? And everybody's going to have areas of their essay that they may think are weaker or stronger than others. But one thing that I loved about U of T, like I guess I'm just into it like that. But when I saw the prompts, I was like, oh, I could write some bomb essays to this. Like I was actually excited. But again, like I like writing and that's not everybody's thing. But I would say definitely take time to reflect really, and then really editing is the biggest part of writing process. Like people undercut and like do not value editing as much as they should. Like if you're going to produce something that is final form, like I feel like in undergrad, like if I had an essay to write, it was usually not final form. It was like, okay, this is good enough to submit and get a good mark, but there were things that you could look back on and say, I would have changed. As much as you can with your medical school application, make sure that you leave enough time and you have enough sets of eyes on it and you edit it enough and take breaks from it that you can safely say, this is what I want to present. This is what I want them to see. And I was able to do that for my essays, and I think it helped me a lot in terms of being able to make them interested in wanting to see me and interview me and things like that. So I think people underestimate how much time it can take and how much editing goes into it. I think it's really important and seek help, right? Like if you know people who are into writing like me or like to edit things and whatnot, I can share my email too if like people want to like share with me, obviously with enough time, because some people will show up like, tomorrow my thing is due, can you do it for me? And I'm just like, no, I can't. So like with, you know, ample time that we can actually work together, like I'm happy to do that. And really just like make sure that you edit.
Yeah, I like 100% agree. And like, I will even say, like, so I was applying so to come in right after undergrad, you have to be applying during your 4th year. And like, what I would say is, please, like, let me reiterate the give yourself time thing. Applications, I think they dropped what, like July, late July, something like that. I remember, you know what I did? I did my favorite questions first, because kind of like Ruma, like there were some where I was like, ooh, you know, froggy typing. I was happily typing away. But then there are some questions where I was like, I don't really like this one. And, you know, you procrastinate and whatever. And, you know, once school starts up, like, you know, you're busy. September of 4th year, especially if you're involved in a lot of extracurriculars, like I was, it all of a sudden was a very, very busy time, and you're like juggling school and extracurriculars. I was also working part-time, and then I was a residence student, so I really had 2 jobs. And then I was applying to medical school, right? So it's one of those things where I also wanted people to edit, and you have to respect people's time, right? Like, you, again, cannot be sending it the night before. You have to give them a decent amount of time. If you're asking medical students, especially, you have no idea what their schedule is like, right? So really get as much done in the summer as you can, and then take some, like exactly like you said, like take a break and then come back to it. I didn't send my essays like far and wide. I sent them to like a couple people that I trusted, and I would, you know, get edits back. And because I gave myself enough time to get edits back, you know, and sometimes you don't even, I didn't take everyone's edits, like take them with a grain of salt, because sometimes there are things that you think, you know, are important to your core that you think should remain. Again, you know yourself best. But I would like to, you know, take people's edits and maybe send it to the 1 or 2 other people that I trusted. And that way I felt like I coalesced everyone's kind of reflections and then made that like final piece. But if you have a lot going on, like there were a bunch of 4th years applying, and a lot of them gave themselves like 2-3 weeks, and it was not cute. I'm telling you right now, it was not cute. So give yourself like months if you can. Not months, but like how, like a good amount of time, you know, not like 2-3 weeks. That's not it.
Is it like a couple essays that you have to write, or like one kind of personal statement that kind of tells your story?
It depends on the school you're applying to. So for U of T, it's a couple of essays, 4 essays. They're not long actually. It's about 250 words for each of them.
Okay.
But I know if you're applying to the States, you have a personal statement to write, which is about I think 2 pages.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a much longer essay, so that gives you more time, so more room to write. And a bunch of other schools in Canada also, they have different requirements. But yeah, to add to what McLeod and the man have wonderfully said is, you know, for me, I started to, for the autobiographical sketch especially, I started to keep track of my experiences, I think 3rd year of undergrad, just like on an Excel sheet. Actually, on McGill has this really nice CV template, so like it's kind of like an Excel sheet. It's like a table. So I just, you know, anything I did that you know, I felt was important for me and I learned from, I just threw it in there. I didn't have time to like actually describe it, so I just put it in there so that I don't forget. Because what happens sometimes is that you think you're not going to forget, but you do forget, or you forget some of the details, right? So, you know, just keep it in there. So when it comes time to putting together the autobiographical sketch, you know, you already have something to work with. And for the personal statements, take as much time as you can. Read. So I can't stress this enough. Read widely. Read books about medicine, books not about medicine, and that gives you inspiration to write. So you know, I can recommend some books for those that are applying. At Tulgawande has a bunch of really amazing books about medicine, and even in the essays themselves, there's some books that decide for U of T, the personal statements. So if you have a book that decides, so for mine, it was Daniela Offrey, and she wrote about what doctors say and what patients hear. I read the book, right? So, read as much as you can, and that gives you something to write.
So now we just want to jump into your medical school experience. So if you guys want to touch on like a day in the life, I know due to COVID, most things are online now. But yeah, so how is it going? And what areas do you guys think you guys are going to specialize in? And what resources you've been using to get through this like crazy time right now? Anyone want to start?
I can start because I'm first year. So chronologically speaking, yeah, it's been interesting because I've come into it being on Zoom University. The only thing that I've gone in person for is anatomy. Mind you, the way that I showed up to my first anatomy lesson was hilarious. Like, I did not know left from right. I was looking around like, okay, don't expect me to know any of this. Some people that I met there had already taken anatomy or like were pretty comfortable. I was just like, what? And now anatomy has become like one of my favorite things. So it's just like goes to show, I know it's challenging, but like I actually really enjoy the process of learning. So yeah, I would say in the beginning, we're doing the introduction to medicine. So one thing I appreciate about U of T that I think other schools don't necessarily do is that they kind of ease you into medical school. So you definitely have a lot of free time during ITM. Like even for me as someone who has like a less, intense science background or whatever, I feel like generally everything is something that builds off of something you already know. I know like going into CPC 1 now is probably going to pick up a lot more and they keep warning us. So I'm like trying to figure out how I'm going to adjust my studying to that. But in terms of the day-to-day, you have usually lectures on Mondays and it's like 3 hours of lecture. That's kind of like your science, med, whatever stuff. And then you have anatomy lab, which now we stopped going in person. It was optional, but because of like the second wave and all, like now it's purely online, but you can go yourself. And I'm like, I don't want to go to like the lab by myself. I guess if people come with you, it's less creepy. But yeah, so you have anatomy and then you have like all of these smaller courses that don't meet all the time. So like portfolio is one of them where it's about like medical humanities and resilience and whatnot. And then you have different like public health and like ethics, and those things are kind of more like not frequent. They just kind of come up when they come up. And then every Friday, like one thing that I actually have really enjoyed is clinical skills. So right now we're like doing interviews with standardized patients and whatnot. And like, it's one of those things where like I have like my preceptors or the tutors or whatever, like I'm always getting like a lot of praise. So I guess that's part of the reason I like it. They're like, oh, you're so good with the SPs. And like the SPs are always like, oh my God, like I feel heard. So I really enjoyed that. I get so invested. I swear to God, like I think they're actually going through those issues. I don't know what it is. Like it's the empath in me, I guess. But that kind of leads into, I guess, like why I wanted to go into medicine. Like some people, everybody wants to do it for different reasons and kind of like a different combination of reasons. I think for me, one of the big things was like the therapeutic relationship. Like as I was going through like my previous work life, I was just like, I don't want to be in a desk job. Like, yes, I was interacting with like partner organizations and like community leaders, but I really wanted to have this therapeutic relationship. I think it's just like sacred in a lot of ways of like having somebody rely on you and like being able to provide some kind of like relief or improvement to their life functionally or whatever, emotionally, psychologically. So that kind of leads into the types of specialties I'm interested in. Like definitely for me, I'm thinking continuity of care. I'm thinking primary care. So like one of the things that I'm very interested in is family med. I think it's great because I'll also have like more opportunity to go into like health policy work and like if I want to do quality improvement. I also have some interest in women's health and I guess people who are pregnant. So if I like surgical aspects, I'd probably do OB, obstetrics and gynecology. And then, yeah, honestly, like there's only a handful of specialties I really see myself going into. Again, like I'm older, so I kind of know myself. But like those things would include things like if I was to want to be a hospitalist, I'd probably be a general internist rather than like a cardiologist. Again, generalist, again, many interests. And I think apart from that, I have some interest in infectious disease. I mentioned like the HIV and AIDS connection, and one of my mentors is an infectious disease specialist. I don't know if I want to only deal with infectious disease, but it's definitely something I'm interested in. And then public health is something I'm interested in as well. So potentially like to preventative medicine and public health residency. So those are kind of some of the areas that I'm interested in. Oh, and pediatrics too, because who doesn't love kids? And it's also like again, primary care generalist type thing.
Yeah. Anyone else want to share what areas they want to specialize in and how their med school experience is like?
I can go next. So I'm in second year right now, so I can speak to first year and like the transition when things moved online. So medical school, actually, it was really, for me, I think it was really different and really actually much more positive for me compared to my grad school and undergrad experience, because I over the course of my grad school and undergrad experience, I had acquired a lot of different study techniques. So I wasn't really reliant on like one study technique. So I didn't really feel like pressure to. I just knew. I think it just gets easier over time how to study. And I right now, like for example, man, you're gonna get into CPC one, but you'll find that the way the questions is set up, very clinical questions, and you're trying to get me to think stepwise and what's the next best step. And for that, what really helped me was like studying with friends and really we're creating like a lot of really cool algorithms, and I just like the way we approach things. And it's with the pandemic, everything is online. You don't really get to see people, so I get have this small group of friends that I do get to see, and it's much less isolating for me, and much more. This is a marathon, right? So you're going to be doing this for a long time, so it's not. I think it's much more sustainable. So like clinical skills, like it's I think everyone loves clinical skills. Like it's the one chance you get to get out of like the textbook life and instead of looking at the computer all the time. Well, this was back when we were meeting in person, but you get to actually practice being a doctor, right? So you're actually in the hospitals talking to patients and listening to their heart, or like just like performing physical exams, and you feel like you learn a lot, and you do learn a lot from those experiences. So for me right now, like what area I want to specialize in I'm still not fully differentiated, but like when I went through neurology block a couple of weeks ago, a lot of people found it really difficult, but for some reason I found it really, really good, and like I really enjoyed it, and I'm like, I think this is what I want to do. But I do think that thinking about something is different. I know, right? I'm not kidding. Like I really loved it.
I'm happy for you. I'm happy for you.
But I do have to say, like, it's thinking about it is one thing, but experiencing it is another. So what I want to do now is go in, shadow a neurologist, like, or like try to arrange for electives in neurology to actually see what it's like, because it's a whole different ballgame when you're actually, doing it every day for the rest of your life, right? And you want to also do something that allows you to have a life outside of medicine, but also like do things that you're passionate about. So if it's research, if it's advocacy work, or if it's I'm also interested in entrepreneurship. So like doing something, starting something that out of nothing. So those are things that I want to carve outside of medicine. So I need to know what specialty works best for that. So I'm also interested in internal medicine. I think that one is more, general. Like I don't want to be just stuck doing one type of thing for the rest of my life. So I think like general internal medicine is something that's interesting, and just like the puzzle solving. I think I'm a very, I love to like try to figure out problems and solve problems. So like that's a specialty that allows for that. But I have to say, like, I'm not fully differentiated yet, so I'm still open. And I really think that in the end, it's really experiencing it and seeing what it's like that will let me know what I want to do.
I have to second some of what you're saying, Justice. I feel like so like once you get out of ITM, essentially you just start to do like blocks of like you do, like I think microbiome was the first block, then immunology, and then eventually you get to cardio, you get to like the bread and butter, cardio, like rest, GI, endocrine, MSK, we just did neuro. And for me, I feel like I'm a bit restless because I feel like as I get more knowledge, I'm like, I want to shadow, like I want to kind of like see what this looks like in person. And like, unfortunately we can't. I'm also, so for me, peds and OB are like really up there for me. And like family is still there as well. Like I agree, like I want to be probably like more general. I want to be in a specialty that probably like allows me to do the work that I wanted to do. So similar. And I feel, yeah, I would love to get out there more. We have something in second year called like longitudinal, what is it? FMLE, what is
family medicine
experience. Yeah. So these kind of like half days or full days that we spend with family physicians in Toronto that expose us to not only the specialty, but, really starting to apply skills and knowledge and lead us into clerkship. So in third and fourth year, you're just like fully in hospital. But for us, it's virtual this year. We get, usually they get to work with kids and do some pediatric stuff in second year as well. And clinical skills, that probably won't happen as well. So I feel like I'm in this weird spot where I'm like, I finally have enough knowledge where I'm like, I could go and shadow and learn things, but we're tied at the wrists. But realistically, I think most of what we're going to want to do for our rest, like what we're going to want to do for the rest of our lives, like the knowledge and the experience of that honestly will come in clerkship. And I think I've like made my peace with that. And I'm like, you know what, in a year and a half, I'll probably know. It's chill. But for right now, OB, P's, and family.
Love that. And Ariel, do you want to share what areas you're interested in?
Sure. I think I'm pretty undifferentiated, like most people. However, my psychiatrist preceptor said I interview well, so maybe psychiatry.
Nice.
Just kidding. But it's so hard. We don't have those actual in-hospital, in-clinic experiences, so it's really hard to know. You can say things and honestly 100% believe it, but I think like for myself, until I'm there, until I'm doing the annoying stuff and finding that I still love the annoying stuff, I can't really make a judgment. So I'm gonna reserve judgment until clerkship, and I'll report back to you guys next year, I guess.
Do you recommend that people go in like set? Do you know what I mean? Because I feel like a lot of people are like, I'm going to become a neurologist. This is what I want to do. This is why I'm going to medical school. Have you like interacted with people who are like that, or do you find that most people are kind of figuring it out?
I think it's one of those things where you have to both, like you should have a sense of what you're interested in and what you're passionate about, but not completely committed to it. I think a lot of people do change their minds in medical school.
I was just going to say, like, you will come across the gunners. Like, in my ICE group, he's from day one, orthopedic surgery. And it's like, okay, like, I'm happy for you, and he probably will be an orthopedic surgeon. There are people who did, what is it? Kinesiology, undergrad, master's kinesiology. Like, there are people where it just makes sense and like, they know, right? And again, like, you're happy for them, but realistically, most people come in. I honestly think most people come in with like a semi like subset, like they've narrowed it down. Like for me, public health is actually on my list, and I crossed it off about a month ago after like learning kind of more about it. So I think that's generally what tends to happen. And then you go into clerkship. But even in clerkship, I was at the OB info night last year, and there was this guy sitting there, and he was like, I was dead set on surgery, or I was dead set, I forget what he wanted to do. And you generally don't put what you want to apply to residency for in your first block of clerkship. And so that's what he put OB as. And then he did the 6 weeks or so of OB and completely fell in love and had to rearrange electives and everything like that because he was completely taken off guard. And he still went through the rest of clerkship, but realistically, like, nothing measured up. And like, not everyone will fall in love with their specialty, but like Ariel said, you'll typically find one that kind of suits you. But I mean, I also heard advice, and I'm going to try and do it, is to go into every rotation in clerkship like you want that specialty. Because then you get the most out of every single one. You take away lessons and you give yourself the opportunity to like fall in love with that specialty if it, you know, if it works for you. So I think like the openness is still important.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was kind of like what we had for like the structured portion. But if you guys want to kind of reflect on any big takeaways from your medical school experience, or even what has kind of like reinforced the fact that you want to be a doctor. Do you know what I mean? Because I feel like when people go to medical school, it's like, yeah, I'm going to become a doctor, you know, it's great. But if you don't really want it, like, is the experience, it's like the experience isn't worth it, right? So what kind of reminds you like every day that this is for you, this is what you want to do, like keeps you going throughout the program?
I can speak
Yeah.
to that. I think the takeaways that I'd like people to take away from this session is, first of all, there is no straight line. So you don't need to be a perfect candidate according to Pre-Med 101 or whatever forums people are using nowadays. You just need to be yourself, and you need to try your very best in an intelligent way. And for the what affirms my career choice question, I think it's just the learning. I think it's the fact that I enjoy the learning so much, and I know that this is going to be the rest of my life. I'm going to be able to learn this cool stuff. I'm going to be able to sharpen my acumen and skills as a clinician, and that just excites me. So, and additionally, the humanitarian side of things, but your learning actually has a tangible benefit on so many people, and that's amazing.
I guess for me, having a comparison point, like I clearly had a different view of my career and worked in a different field. I'm genuinely excited. And I remember in undergrad when I would come across mature students, they were always like on top of everything, super like involved. They would always answer all the questions. And like Zoom University, sometimes people don't want to talk, like in my CBL, like it's just like pulling teeth. And I'm always just like throwing out my ideas and like trying to engage. And it's funny because I would look at the mature students in undergrad and be like, wow, like they want this so much, or like they have a certain kind of like energy for it. And I think being away from school for a time will give that to you. So I go in every day just like genuinely excited, and I learn so much, and I'm enjoying it. And I think one of the big differences from what I can tell between like a typical like pre-med pressure cooker environment versus medical school is, like with my limited understanding as a first year in my first couple of weeks, is that in medical school they're trying to make sure you don't fail, right? Like in undergrad it's like this thing of like survival of the fittest. And it's interesting because friends that I know that were pre-med, and some of them went to med school and some of them didn't, when I was in economics and development, like there's this thing where the professors will say stuff like, how many people in the room want to become doctors, how many people want to become lawyers, only one of you, or some shit like that. And imagine what that does to students that are marginalized. Like there's a difference between saying that to someone whose daddy is a doctor and whose mommy is a doctor and who generally knows that world, and saying that to someone who's the first in their family to do it, or has some other kind of barriers, or is just like not set up, like hasn't been set up for that path, right? And it's so damaging. And I don't think they realize that, because they think that they're just saying something that's like cool and funny and they see on TV or whatever. But it can actually like destroy people's self-esteem. And so I think it's really important to honor yourself and like the time and the effort that you put into your schooling. Like know that you are enough, whether or not med schools see that. I hope they do see that, and that everybody gets in and everybody thrives. But yeah, I just know, because I guess I've seen how strangely my very circuitous path in life has kind of like coalesced in a way. And I think there is so much benefit to having diverse experiences and education as a physician. Like some of my favorite lecturers are people who are like, oh yeah, like my undergrad was in philosophy and math. Like they're so well-rounded. They have like so many things to talk about. And I feel like sometimes I look at a problem, not with like a pre-med mentality, which obviously can be helpful, but sometimes I'm just like, oh, like what's the like economic impact of this? Like what's the, you know what I mean? Like I'm just like kind of looking at different angles. And I feel like that can be really helpful too. But overall, I've honestly enjoyed it. They choose really good lecturers for the most part. They're always doing quality improvement, like, do evaluations, like, do you like this lecture? Do you not? Like, they really put in effort. It's honestly getting into medical school. In medical school, it's very hard to fail. Like, they don't want, you will work hard not to fail, but they do not want you to fail. And I think that's a very big difference.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so we have another question. Just so if there's anything you could do differently in your undergrad, knowing what you know now, what would you change with the whole experience if you could do it all over again?
I think in undergrad, like I was very, I'll say uptight, if I refer to. I think that there's so many ways to do well without having to lock yourself in the library and study, 24/7. So I think if I were to do things differently, find a group of people that are highly motivated and share the same goals, or like they don't have to be wanting to go into medical school. At least they're like they're passionate about whatever they're interested in, and work towards building that relationship. And because I say this, it's getting into medicine or being successful. A tiny part of it is your personality, but most of it is the people around you, right? So having a community around you that's supportive and willing to see you grow and sort of like friendly competition, you can say it's very useful. So if I were to go back, I would have, rather than locking myself up in the library in undergrad, I would have studied, but also like try to just build some relationships early on. But it still worked out in the end. And I say take this advice with a grain of salt, right? So like just know yourself, right? And just be willing to learn, and it's gonna work out, right? It's gonna work out.
Yeah, I mean, I pretty much echo that. I'll be honest. So when in undergrad, I was doing a lot of work, but I was like a work hard, play hard girl. And I feel like I stick to that even in medical school. It's a good way to live. I don't think I'm going to change that, at least not for a while. But whatever play hard means to you, like, please find ways to take care of yourself. Like I can't I can't say that enough, and I think that rings true in medical school. It will in residency and in practice. Finding ways to take care of yourself, whatever that means to you, is just so important. And once you're in medical school, thank God it's pass fail. Obviously, we're all trying to be great doctors, and the pass is also in ITM. It's like a 76, so you're still trying to get like decent marks anyways. But yeah, find ways to take care of yourself. In undergrad, most of my friends honestly were in politics or global development. I didn't have a lot of friends in science. That's just, I made friends with the people who I was organizing with. The sisters who I had were the Black sisters in QBAS. And motivation, I think, can look like a lot of different things. It doesn't have to be like we're all like aiming to get A's. My best friend was a girl who was like to get degrees, and she's living and she's happy. But she was motivated in a lot of different ways. And I think that's contagious. It doesn't always have to be academic, but I agree that like you want driven people around you, in their own way. And that can look like a whole lot of different things. But honestly, in terms of like what I do differently, I think for me, when I finally got into the pool of like applications, listen, again, like I didn't know any medical students. I didn't know any doctors. So when I finally, started to look up on these forums, first of all, the forums, leave the forums alone. The forums are lying to you. The people with the 4.0s, the people who have like publications on this and that and whatever, and are still not getting in, that will do nothing for your self-esteem. Just leave them alone. So leave the forums. I think that's where I also found like I got a lot of insecurity in terms of like my lack of research. I was like, oh, was I supposed, because I didn't have a mentor, right? But honestly, like trust in yourself, trust that what you're doing and what your passions are enough. I feel like again, like that will come, that your heart, like it'll come across. And Sometimes it takes one try, sometimes it takes 3 tries. You know, we have, I'm 23 right now, and, you know, people in my class, we're celebrating their 30th birthday next year. It's chill, we're all family. So, you know, take your own time, just take care of yourself, and, you know, just have a good support system. I think that's the only thing I can say. Like, the support system is everything. But just like, you know, have faith, stay the course.
Ariel, would you like to add anything in?
Yeah, of course. So what would I do differently? I think he was mentioning the student having a mentor. I think I would try to find a mentor because I also didn't have a mentor, and I know some universities don't have a med school, not many doctors around. It's really hard to get a doctor mentor that knows what they're doing, or a medical school mentor that knows what they're doing. And you know, when you're going through those tiers, those books thrown at walls, those people can really help calm you down, bring you back to the basics of what actually matters, and make the process a lot less stressful, which it can be extremely stressful, and it was for me. So I wish I had a mentor and I was less stressed.
Great. I think we're over the time, and we just want to say we're really grateful for you guys to take time to talk to us. I think we do have a bit of questions in the comments that we can just quickly address before we finish up. So somebody commented, would you suggest completing a master's before applying to medical school? Or is it better to wait until you have your MD? Yeah, so you guys can just answer that. So do you guys suggest getting a master's before applying?
So like you have to find out, or think or reflect on why you want to get the master's. Because if you try and get the master's just to get into medical school, I wouldn't recommend that. Because the master's, especially like basic science masters, it's really, really hard. It's very grueling. So if you're just doing it to get into medical school, there's so many other ways to get into medical school. So I wouldn't recommend that. So for me, like I remember like the day I was applying to grad school, I had a friend that just got into med school right after, like he was a very close friend undergrad. He just got into UT. And he was telling me, why are you applying to grad school? Why don't you just like, you know, take a gap year? I was like, well, I actually wanted to do research anyway, so I might as well just do it now, and get it over with, or like just, you know, do it and apply after, right? So for me, I wanted to do research. That's why I did a master's, right? So the thing that sometimes it can be better to do an MD first before doing a master's, because after you've done your MD, what happens to a lot of people is that, you know, they, especially like after during residency, they see a problem and they like, okay, I think I need to do a master's in this specific thing to address this problem. So they know exactly what they're going to do the master's in. So like it could be MPH, it could be like a public health master's, so it could be a science-based master's, or a PhD. Some people do a PhD during residency, right? So in that case, then yeah, you can do the MD first. And it's a journey, right? It's not like they decide, oh, I'm going to do a master's after the MD. They just like experience something, saw a problem, and they said, this is what I need to do to solve this, and they decide to do a master's, right? So it's not about just like doing it to get into medical school. It's doing it because you want to do it.
And there are also programs, I was going to say, you can do master's programs like throughout med school. There's the Masters of Systems of Leadership. I think that's the Masters of Science. That's really, really cool. There's a Masters of Engineering if anyone's doing engineering in undergrad, which is like a lot, but you know, there might be one more, but I think I'm forgetting it. But like Justice mentioned, like I'm considering doing a Masters of Public Health after med school. So it really depends, but like there's options to do it if you go into med first.
Yeah, I would just add, it seems for people who want to go into academic medicine, like to be in the hospital teaching learners and whatnot, those people will pursue masters and PhDs for the most part. So that's depending where, but I think those decisions are often made when people are actually in residency.
I think U of T has an MD PhD program too, if I'm correct, right?
Yeah.
So if you wanted to do both, that's also an option. But really hard to get into, I believe.
I've even seen people who did a PhD first and then came to medical school.
There's someone in our class.
There's someone in our class. Yeah.
Yeah.
If anyone has any questions,
program by the way is Sorry, McLeod.
I was just gonna say, if anyone has any questions about that particular route, like you can send any of us.
Exactly. The ND-PhD program is also like fully funded, so you don't have to pay the tuition fees. But it's like, it's a much longer time, so you have to think about that too.
Okay, so they also asked another question. If you could apply to U of T Med again, would you apply through the Black student stream?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
There you go.
Like, why not?
Right? Yeah. So do you guys notice some benefits? Like, I know you guys touched on it before, but just to like talk about the Black student stream, like, how did that enhance your application process, like the full experience? Like, yeah, because I know you guys talked about with your interviews, you did have other people of color like in your interviews to make you more comfortable.
Yeah, so I think the BSAP, the Black Student Stream, like made me a lot more comfortable, like talking about my experiences, right? Because I knew that the people that are reading this would understand, right? So I did a lot of work at my church, and I did a lot of work in just like, like things that I felt like, the Black community knows, right? Like my people know, you know what I mean, right? So, I think that just makes you a lot more comfortable because you can really just like, you don't have to like select what you want to apply. You try to think of, this is what I think they want to, and because you can just be yourself. That's what I think.
Yeah, I think exactly what you just said. There's also like an extra question that comes with applying through BSAP. So like that, but again, they're all like 200 words, so really not long. But yeah, for the most part, it was just, it was a great time. They also make a point to connect you with current Black medical students, which I thought was like really great for community building. Like I didn't know any Black med students on interview day. We had lunch with a few, and I don't know, like Amal, where you were in the interview process if you got the lunch. But for our year, it was really great in terms of building like year like community and connections. And like I've heard people mention like BMSA and how like the inter-year connections are pretty strong, and they have been because there's such a focus on literally like before you're even in, making sure you get connected. And so I had like informal mentors, before I even was accepted, and it was something I was really grateful for in like my transition process. So.
Yeah, and McLeod reached out to me. Like we were chatting on Facebook Messenger. She's like towards the end of last year, or like the last academic year. Yeah. So people really do look out for each other, and I appreciate that. Just trying to pay it forward.
Yeah. So the medical school experience, especially as a Black student, has been overall pretty positive at U of T.
Yeah, and there was
for the most
that's
part,
awesome to hear.
What is it called?
Like this is the year that we had the most Black students, so that's honestly a huge honor to be part of that class. I think we're 24 students.
How big is the class, if you don't mind me asking?
The class is like 250 something, 257, something like that. So it's about 10% or so. But like from where you came from, like in terms of like representation in medicine to where we are now. And obviously U of T is like a leader in that, at least in Canada. So yeah, honestly, it's great. Like I have a lot of Black peers. I can kind of chat with them and like bring up different things that, you want to have in an intra-community space. You may not want to talk to non-Black people about. And honestly, they're just like chill people. It's another form of community that you can access within the university. And I never want to be the only one. Like that's not the goal. So it's nice to not be the only one and to be surrounded by other Black med students.
Totally. Yeah. I think, sorry, go ahead.
I will say it's not without its problems. So U of T is trying really hard and it's very appreciated, but you will come across like the occasional person that doesn't have quite a robust understanding on certain topics. And it can sometimes be like disheartening, but it's only very occasionally and it's no reason not to apply to U of T. And another thing I would say is that, as we progress farther into clerkship, it'll be a very different ballgame as a Black medical student. We're going to encounter patients with a wide array of beliefs, and we're going to encounter a lot of trouble as Black students. And I think it's a challenge that we're all going to need to learn how to deal with, and it's just the reality of being a Black student.
Mm-hmm. It definitely is. What I was going to add. Oh, the BMSAC. That was the other historic thing that happened this year. Molly, you remind me that all like the Black medical students gathered for the first time across, like from all Canadian schools in Toronto this past March. And it was like the momentous thing ever to be like in a room of how many of us must have there been? I don't know. It was like 80 plus, 90 plus, like Black medical students. It was like the most empowering space to be a part of, and that's something that got started this year. And while the AGM will be like virtual next year, like there's movement, you know, there's hope. And BSAPs have now been implemented at like different schools. So, you know, I think it was Saskatchewan, Ottawa, Queens is, you know, they're trying, but progress.
Yeah.
I heard they have Selena Caesar Chavanez. Do you know her? So she's like that MP, former MP from the Liberal Party, but she's a Black woman that Queens hired to deal with like the Faculty of Medicine.
Mm-hmm.
So hopefully she can make some waves.
Yeah. Queens is a whole different part, but yeah, again, you know, hope. And there's incredible medical students at like each of these institutions that are like at the forefront of all of this change. So they're great minds all around.
Nice.
Okay, so the last question before we end up finishing is just if you guys have any bit of advice to anyone that wants to be in a position, any undergrad students, what are some things that you could tell the future generation?
It's okay to change your mind. Clearly, like I'm a very big proponent of that. I don't think that everybody is leaving high school or even university knowing exactly what they want to do, or you may have a very strong idea and then realize that maybe that's not the career you want to spend your entire life in, right? I think it's really important to stay open. And I won't lie, doing a transition into medicine was not easy, especially because a lot of people who do make that switch will be in a financial position to be like, oh, I'm going to take time off to like do another bachelor's or whatever, or I'm going to do 2 years. Like in the States, like post-bacs are really common. I actually had a friend that did one of those. It's like, no, I ain't got no time and no money for that. So really trying to finesse it within my life. And I'm not going to lie, there was like a 2-year period where I was exhausted because I was working, family commitments, volunteering, trying to remember my high school science and like add a little plus, you know, to be able to do my MCAT. But honestly, it all paid off. And I'm really happy. I have like a certain sense of knowing what I want and knowing myself that I did not have in undergrad. And I think it can only serve me well, especially in clerkship, I think is when that non-traditional spice, you know, can kind of help in terms of having worked, you know, for several years after undergrad and just kind of knowing how to carry myself and knowing how to deal with tricky situations. So don't give up. If there's anyone who is in that position who's trying to do a switch, or, you know, even if you knew you wanted to go into medicine and it didn't work out and you're applying again, like just don't give up, because you never know when that opening will come for you, and then just jump. Like don't say anything, just go and do it.
Nice.
I guess I can just add, like, you're not alone, right? So if you feel that, you know, this is it's, you know, there's this thing like this, it's lonely at the top, but it's not really, it's not true, because if you're aiming for something, I think there are a lot of people also aiming for the same thing. So I'm trying to, I think we mentioned this earlier, just try to find people that, you know, that you gel with. And you know, I have friends that, you know, really helps me in undergrad. There were times where I was really down and just couldn't, you know, keep going, but you know, they actually like just helps me in many ways. So you're not alone, right? So just as the man said, you know, don't give up.
Okay, so it's been 2 hours. I don't
We're
know.
so sorry we went over.
Yeah, we are so grateful to have you guys speak to us. It was honestly it was amazing, really informative. Thank you guys again for everything. Yeah, I think we're pretty much
Yeah, I'll end the broadcast here.
done. Okay.
Thanks for inviting us.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course.